Hi, welcome to another Expert Insights discussion. In this follow-up conversation, we're joined again by Javier Delgado from Mirai. During our first discussion with Javier, he introduced the Digital Markets Act, DMA, outlined its original intention, the criteria used to identify a gatekeeper, and its impact on major platforms like Google and Booking.com. He also outlined what the potential implications would be for hotels. Today, Javier talks about his recent trip to a European Commission DMA compliance workshop in Brussels, how Booking has responded to their gatekeeper designation, and Google's response to the DMA and their trial changes of search results in Germany, Belgium, and Estonia. Really hope you enjoy the conversation. Hey, Javier, thanks for joining us again. This is a fast-moving topic. We were talking 2 weeks ago. Here we are again talking about the DMA. Thanks for joining us. Welcome on board for another conversation. Everything well with you, I'm hoping?
All good. Thank you, Trevor. Thanks very much for having us and for putting attention onto this important topic, which is, it's not high on everyone's agenda.
It isn't, but the more I'm seeing that is being discussed about it, it seems to be getting a lot more traction, which is obviously what we want to try and achieve as well. So when we last spoke, and let's kind of set the scene of what we're going to discuss today, we're going to touch on three things. Booking.com, when we last spoke, they had literally just produced the relevant information, their response, what they were going to do. I know it was really hot off the press. You hadn't had the chance to really do a deep dive into it. So we were going to circle back to get your thoughts. I'm also aware that you highlighted you were going over to Brussels. There was a meeting. So we'd obviously like to just hear a little bit about that, the context about it, what came from it. And then the third point is, since we spoke, there's obviously been Google have responded. There's been things going on that relates to Google. So it feels a bit like deja vu because it was Booking and Google we spoke about 2 weeks ago. But this, I think, reiterates the point that you made, that this is just going to be an onward discussion point. So let's kick off with the first point, which is Booking.com and your view, having read through their document, just your general thoughts. We're not casting aspersions or anything like that. We're not asking for lawsuits or whatever it may be, but just want to, you're at the front end of this. You're working with hoteliers. All of this is from how it's going to impact hotels' perspective, what we think things might change. So tell us about Booking.com and what's been going on from that side.
Okay, so the report they published at the beginning of the month, which was then assessed in Brussels, and that's the second part of the discussion. I now have had the time to read it properly and actually generate an opinion. And once again, I'm just putting out here my personal opinions.
Just your opinion. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, all the caveats that go with that.
Yeah. So basically, Booking has done a tremendous job at, in a very careful way, presenting the changes that they have made. And there are some very positive things that have happened as a result of the gatekeeper status they were subject to. So the first one and most important is the parity rate clause that has been removed from those contracts, and that's a game-changing thing, because part of the value of Booking.com and the force it has had and still has in the European industry and worldwide was built on the parity clause, which prevented hotels from having better rates or better conditions in terms of inventory pricing, whatever that was, in alternative sites, including their own websites. That's gone now, and it seems it's gone forever. Now, this is extremely good. It had already been declared non-legal or illegal in a few European countries.
In our last conversation,
but now it's across the board in Europe. Very positive. Now, there are many other things, even though I've seen actually a clause in the French contract that it's a bit funny, but let's get to that on a later episode of this series. So there are many other things beyond the requirements of the parity clause. Article 5.3, 5.4, 6.5 specifically are particularly relevant. And for many of those, Booking has taken a very light approach, to put it
Okay.
that
That's a
way.
delicately phrased, yeah.
Well, again, the DMA is a complex matter and a complex law which is subject to interpretation, and I think
Yep, fair
that
point.
interpretation is a key point, and this came up during the discussions in Brussels.
Hmm.
So basically, let's touch upon the three most important topics.
Hmm.
Is one of the DMA clauses that applies to gatekeepers is that they should provide information about the consumers
Hmm.
that are operating with the gatekeeper
Yeah.
platform to the advertisers who are on the other side, if you will,
Okay. Yep.
of that platform. Now,
Hmm.
it is true that Booking.com has opened an API,
Hmm.
but that the API is not providing full details
Okay.
of the consumer,
So
and
me as
also
the consumer going to booking.com, making a booking through a hotel that is advertising, there would be a level of information that would expect to be passed. And what you're
correct.
saying is maybe what was expected that would come across compared to what may be coming across in the API, there is a discrepancy.
Well,
Or a
again,
difference of view, a difference of interpretation.
exactly. So, for example, a key point that was brought up during the Brussels discussion, and everyone I think is going to understand, the email address of the individual, of the traveler,
Hmm.
is probably the most important piece of information that you can get, because
Yeah.
email, no, we're in 2025
Enables the
almost.
hotel to communicate directly with me. Yeah.
Well, not only communicating, but also identifying the
Yeah.
audience,
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
tracking,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
a
Through
myriad
other
things
things.
are
Yeah.
derived from the different email addresses.
Yeah.
So that piece of information, that pivotal piece of information, will not be shared by Booking at any time. So
Okay.
they're keeping that to
So
themselves.
so just understanding what you said, what you could argue would be the key piece of information
Yeah,
that would be expected or interpreted as maybe going across is not going to go across.
correct. Now, there's another important point which I fully understand where Booking is coming from. They said, we will only provide the traveler information once the transaction has happened. And this is where we
Okay.
get into the weeds. Now, where is the
Hmm.
transaction? The transaction is at the reservation time, at the check-in time, or at the commission
Payment.
collection time.
Well, oh, okay. Yeah,
Not
yeah, yeah.
payment,
No, not
commission
payment.
collection.
Collection.
So
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
hotel paying
You
Booking
pay
for the
booking.
service
Right. Okay.
provided, right?
Yeah.
So you could argue at which point has the transaction been completed. And
Yep.
actually, Booking, in a very smart way, they're saying we will only provide the information, which does not include the email,
Hmm.
after the hotel has satisfied the commission derived from that booking, from that reservation.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So obviously, the capacity of the hotel to contact that traveler is only going to happen ex post,
After the event.
after,
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
after checkout, but
No.
after commission payment. Now,
Yeah.
in my I would do the same thing if I was Booking, because
Sure.
I have added value, I have provided value in
Yep.
a contract which is getting these traveler into your hotel. You
Yep.
need to pay me for that, and only
Yep.
once you have paid I will provide you the information.
Yeah.
So
Because then we've completed our transaction for
the,
that.
the, the
Yeah.
exactly, the full circle has been closed. But you could argue that the transaction would have happened at reservation time.
I guess it depends which perspective you're coming at it from, isn't it?
Exactly. But the point is, the email address is the most important part of the personal information about the traveler.
Hmm.
It is true that they do provide a telephone number, which
Hmm.
is, a good way of addressing or accessing an individual.
Hmm.
But the email address is, in my humble opinion, the most relevant piece of information. And they've been very clear. Actually, let me share an anecdote, because they said during the discussion in Brussels.
Hmm.
Now we're getting a bit ahead of
Yeah,
ourselves,
that's
but
fine. That's fine. Just roll it in.
they said we will share the address. And I raised my hand and said, okay, which address are you
What
going to
did
share?
this?
Because,
Yeah.
in 2025, everyone would assume that the address is the email address. They said, no, the address, the postal address.
The
It's like,
postal address.
okay,
Yeah, yeah,
so do you expect me to send the guy a letter?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, they were very well prepared for this session, rightly so. I mean,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about a
Yeah.
very big
It's a
company with
bit, yeah.
very high stakes.
And a lot of
So,
impact. Yeah. If this.
but it's the nuances, those small nuances, like the address, not
Hmm.
email address, but the address,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah. They just leave
I,
it
I
vague
found
enough, isn't it? Yeah.
I found it interesting. So then there's another point in which was very relevant for this discussion, which is Articles 5.3 and 5.4, in which the gatekeeper, in this case, the incumbent would be Booking.com, should allow the advertiser, the hotel, so the supply side of the equation, to connect and close contracts, because remember, the DMA does not talk about hotels. It's general for any kind of industry. So they say that they should be able to generate contracts to do business together, the supply and the demand, directly through the platform. And we touched upon this last time we spoke. So that has not been addressed at all.
Right. Okay.
Now you could think, and one of the the things that we speculated about last time we spoke was that there would be ad format or some form or buttons that they would take you to the official hotel's website. Now, we were speculating back then. Now that the report is out and that the hearing has been made in the European Commission, this does not seem to be the case. Now, again, we are in the land of interpretation. So how is the EC going to react to this? We don't know.
Yeah, because that's an interest, because from the outset, I'm coming at it from a very simple perspective, just listening to what you're saying, to have those two things connected together seems very straightforward. It seems to achieve what they're trying to achieve through the DMA.
You're absolutely right.
So not having a provision for doing that just seems, I can't even, to use your previous example of how they were vague using the word address to try and deal with it. There's just been no vagueness from what you've said around how they're going to tackle the 5.3, 5.4. They haven't responded to it at all. Yeah.
So I found that interesting, and let's not forget that the DMA, what it's trying to do is bring down the barriers that the gatekeepers, the so-called designated gatekeepers, have. And obviously these gatekeepers in general, I'm not talking about Booking.com in particular, they have built these fortresses around data marketing, which is, they're almost impossible to attack because of these modes, these digital modes and these data modes that they have developed, in a very smart and professional way. But the DMA is exactly pointing at that to kind of bring down those barriers and allow a more free market, a more fluid market, if you will. Now, you're not sharing the email address, which is a fundamental component of anyone's identity.
Certainly nowadays in digital, and we're talking DMA, digital markets. It's a key word, isn't it?
Yeah, it could have been the Postal Markets Act, so you could write to people, but it's not the case. It's not the case. So jokes aside, there are very good things, like we talked about parity, and there are others that have been addressed in a very light manner. Another important point is the payments. In which there's one of the options that Booking offers to their affiliates, to their advertisers, to the hotels in this case, is to provide a payment system in which Booking is paying the hotel. As a result, they keep control of the retail price. So it's no longer the hotel who decides the retail price, it's Booking.com who decides the retail price. And they can decide, and they actually do, discount from their own margin, by which they are selling at whatever rate they want. They could even sell at a loss if they wish to, right? In this case, when you say, okay, you have removed the parity clause, but in order to get visibility, you are asking hotels to sign up to this specific feature in which they lose control of their retail price. And that's now in the hands of Booking.com. It's very shady.
So for simple numbers, if I was a hotel, my rate that I'm putting out there is, say, €100 a night. Booking.com could decide to sell that room at $90 and take the hit themselves within the margin that they put. Yeah,
that is exactly correct. But let me reframe it to be more precise. Assuming the hotel is operating on an agency model, and this is important. Agency model is the model in which the hotel will collect the money upon checkout and will pay the commission to Booking.com afterwards. So the flow
so they
of
pay
money,
commission on whatever rate the individual has bought through Booking.
Yes, the hotel has determined the rate, and they have a commission. For the sake of the discussion, let's assume it's 20%. So on your example of 100 euros,
Yeah.
the hotel is collecting 100 euros upon check-in or check-out, and then
Yeah.
is paying 20
Yeah.
after that to booking, right?
Booking.
That's
Yeah.
a very clear cut.
Yeah.
What booking is pushing for is the booking payments. Now, the booking
Okay.
payments has two important components. One of them, there's a cost attached to it, rightly so, because they're assuming
Yeah.
the
They're
risk and
managing the costs. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, and
Managing
the
the
cost.
process.
So
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that if you, as a hotel, as an advertiser, if you opt into this, you no longer have control of your retail price. So it's booking's prerogative, it's booking's decision to sell that at 100, which should be
What you
the
will sell it
normal
at. Yeah.
rate or the agreed upon rate,
Yeah.
or they could sell it at 90, 95,
So
80,
how
or
can they?
75.
So what does? Okay. So and we're going off topic a little bit, but this just
Not
fascinates me. The
not
one.
not not really, because
Okay.
it's
So
all everything is
if I'm a
intertwined.
hotel, what
Yeah.
rate am I providing my room to booking for them to decide? Because otherwise, if they're selling it less than, I can't understand the numbers. So
Right.
explain that
So
to me.
the answer is it depends. If you
Okay.
are on an agency clean, pure, original model, to name it like that,
Yeah.
you would say the retail price is 100. I
Yeah.
am, as a hotel, I am in
Yeah.
control of the final retail price, and I pay whatever commission I have agreed with
On the
booking
back of that.
afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a clean cut.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, if you're in a merchant model where booking is collecting the money on your behalf,
Yeah.
then the client checks in and then the client checks out, and then it's the hotel
All
who
paid to book.
sends the
Yeah.
invoice to book, and booking will pay to that
Yeah.
hotel a net rate. In this case, it would be 80. So booking would have collected 100 or
Oh,
not.
so it's not that the hotel has set a rate and said this is the minimum. Booking could just sell it at whatever.
And that's exactly what happens.
So
And
if
that's
they,
how.
I mean, they wouldn't, I'm sure, but if they wanted
No,
to sell a
let's,
€100
let's be
night
very
at 50
clear.
euro night, they could.
They could, and they do. Meaning they play with the margin, because they have told the hotel, let's do a real example.
Yeah.
So it was 100, but now you have opted into my payment systems, commission 20, another 5% commission. So let's say 25, right?
Yeah.
25, you're going to get a net of 75.
Yeah.
But now, because I have taken control of that pricing through the imposition of the payment method, which is now a fundamental piece in order to get business or incremental business or good visibility within booking.
Yeah.
I booking.com decide whatever rate I want to apply to that room that you are operating. And you no longer have a saying if it's 100, if it's 75, 50, or 80.
Wow.
So the retail pricing is transferred completely into booking. Now, in order to have visibility, you need to opt into this payment system where booking controls. Now, additional to that, very important, booking has 3 different so-called loyalty programs, which are discounts, by which the hotel, the more commission they pay, the higher in the ranking, the more traffic, the more business, the more money going into booking. So you see the cycle here. They have preferred plus, and another one, which the name just escaped my mind now, but there are 3 different, Genius. So all of these programs have one thing in common. It's the hotel subsidizing them because they are reducing the amount of net money they will be making for every room night sold via booking. Now, obviously, if you're telling a retailer, here's my product, you collect the money, you decide the retail pricing, and in order to get more business, I will give you harder and deeper discounts. Now, if you start adding up the 10, 20, 30% plus the commission plus the payments, you can go north of 40% quickly, right? So the toll that you need to pay, the bar is getting higher and higher. The monetization for every room that's sold is getting higher and higher. And the hotel is finding themselves in a hole that is very difficult to jump out from because, you need to pay more money. It's, mind me the analogy, but it's kind of trying to get out of drugs by consuming more drug. It's like, I'm not sure that this is the right path.
No, and so just tie that up then, how that feeds, because we started a lot. I took us on that little tangent there, based on you saying it was relevant to the DMA. So tie that back together for us.
So we said, a very positive thing is the end of parity clauses, which is certainly positive. But at the same time, you are preventing the connection between supply and demand freely, and you're imposing new payment methods through which Booking takes full control of the retail price.
Yeah.
So there's no parity clause, but I'm pushing for controlling the retail price, which de facto means it's almost the same situation, or could potentially end up the same situation. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just a different way of coming at it.
That's how it connects.
Interesting. Right. Okay. You've mentioned this meeting that you were at, and you've given the example of Booking talking about the address. Tell us the context of that meeting first of all. What was it? What was the meeting about? Kind of what was the general groups of people that were there, and then maybe give us some highlights of what came out from it.
So very important. First of all, this meeting was open to the public to participate via video conference. So anyone that wanted to participate could have participated. I'm not disclosing anything that is private or confidential whatsoever.
Okay.
This meeting is the so-called DMA compliance workshop that every time an incumbent platform is designated as gatekeeper, 6 months after the grace period they are given to comply with the DMA, the European Commission calls a general industry session. They did this with TikTok, with Google, with everyone in the past, to assess if the report they present on the DMA compliance is compliant or not. At least what are the opinions, the views from different people in the industry.
From different views, right? Okay.
Now, who attended that session? There were a number of. I'm sure that you could find this information on the EC website, but basically it was hotel associations, hotel companies, meaning hotel operators. They're one of the few of the bigger players were there. Who else was there? A few train companies that I think are looking at this carefully to see what could happen to them. But roughly it was about 40 people or 50 people. 6 people from Booking.com were present, very well prepared. And then the European Commission. That was basically the setting. And it lasted for about 4.5 hours.
Okay. And the principle being that they were just questioning Booking.com about a response, or was it
not? The EC was extremely neutral. They were not questioning. They were kind of listening to the interaction that took place
from the other people that were taking part and
correct.
Booking. So, and that. So you, for instance, would have been asking the question, challenging, or
I asked the question about
deeper.
The address. So Booking presented a few slides on what they had done to address the DMA and become compliant on their watch. And they gave very clear explanations. We have done this, we have done that. This didn't apply to us, this didn't apply. So they gave a good explanation. And then the different participants, like me, we were either questioning or asking about or double clicking, if you will, on a few of the topics, clarifying and so forth. And the European Union didn't take any stance whatsoever. They were just taking notes,
just
listening. Exactly.
Because I guess from that, what they're seeing is the two sides of the equation. They've put out the act, they've seen Booking's response. Now they're hearing from the industry that are questioning or clarifying, so that there is the potential, I guess, to either leave it as it is or refine it. I mean, what would you? Let's maybe take this in 2 steps. If you were to kind of summarize the meeting, coming out from that meeting, what you think the general mood music was, what your overview interpretation, and then maybe we could do a little bit of forward gazing and any kind of vibes as to what may happen around it. So first thing, kind of mood music around that meeting when you came out from it.
It's overall, I think it was very good. The fact that we had, the big gatekeeper in the travel hotel industry, Booking.com, sitting with the industry. So that was good, and everyone acknowledged that it was a good opportunity. There were a few tense moments because, again, some hotel associations from certain countries were very, very aggressive in presenting their points of view, and rightly so. I'm not saying they were overdoing
wrong or whatever.
Exactly.
Not judging.
A few countries raised the payment thing as something very difficult to deal with, and they actually said, if this was parity is over, but now do you have new tools to impose your parity or make the hotel lose control of the end price, we really didn't get anywhere.
Yeah.
There was also on 6.5, I raised specifically a topic because 6.5 is about self-preferencing. And if you remember, that's the kind of the lever that has been used against Google to increase the visibility of VSSF, vertical search services. And as a result, the decrease of visibility from hotels, it says that you cannot favor yourself, give yourself better treatment versus third parties. So on 6.5, the second part of the sentence, if you go and look at the sentence, it says that the incumbent, the gatekeeper in this case, should not discriminate the third parties. Now, or my interpretation was that if a hotel that is paying less commission is being discriminated, lower ranked than a hotel that is paying a higher commission, that is self-preference, because the interest that is ruling that decision is bookings, which is the gatekeeper in this case.
To get more
commission.
Right,
but they said, no, well, that's not the interpretation, because this refers to first-party services versus third-party services. And I said, well, again, we're in the land of interpretation. That's the way you're interpreting it, rightly so, which is the most interesting,
which is what you would be doing from their perspective,
or beneficial to you.
Yeah.
But on the same token, you could look at this from my perspective. So who's right?
Yeah.
And this is where
and that's where it falls.
The EC should intervene and determine which is the right approach.
Yeah. The European Commission needs to step in and kind of look at that and clarify the word.
We will see. So to your point, I think it was a very good meeting, very necessary meeting. The mood was constructive at some times, tense at some other times, but overall, I'm very glad that first of all it happened, and second that we participated.
That makes sense. And so do you see, I mean, you've probably answered the second part of that question in terms of moving forward. Do you see that as an exercise which is now about refining, clarifying, tightening up the language around the act, or do you feel it's potentially a bigger question than just that?
Well, it's difficult to say. What we saw, if we rewind back to February when Google was, had been designated gatekeeper at the end of 2023, and the 6-month period came to an end in February this year. They presented their changes, the same thing that happened to Booking last week. That's what Google did 7 months ago, and it was like, okay, this is what we have done. The European Union almost immediately said, you're non-compliant, we are opening an investigation. And that investigation is still ongoing.
Okay.
So is the EC going to do the same thing with Booking? We don't know, but they should announce publicly in case they are opening an investigation. If they do,
if they were doing the same way, but you have to do it the same way as they did for Google. If they're doing
exactly, so I guess they now need to spend time and analyze everything point by point, and determine if they are satisfied because they exactly or not.
Oh, wow.
We don't know yet. I haven't checked this today, but maybe it's already published.
It could be already there. Yeah. Okay. You mentioned Google. Let's talk about the third point that we have for today's discussion, because that's also been very interesting. So I'm just going to say, right, Google, what have they announced? What's been going on? What's the impact? Over to you.
Okay. This is where it gets most interesting, I think. So again, my humble opinion, my perspective is that Google was designated gatekeeper. They made some changes. They introduced some changes to their search results and the way they present this. They presented this in Feb. Immediately, we said this is non-compliant. They've been iterating and trying, working with the commission and with other stakeholders in the industry, including us and companies like ours. We are competitors of ours. So there's been an ongoing open discussion with numerous meetings to address this. And it appears they are getting nowhere, meaning that Google, my interpretation is that they feel they are in a black box because they were given this law and they said comply with it, and they worked for 6 months, came back and says, okay, this is our interpretation and we believe we are compliant. And the European Commission immediately said, no, you're not, but we're not telling you what you need to address or what do you need to change, what do you need to
Oh,
fix.
really? Okay. So just
That
right.
that's the that's the
Okay.
black
That's
that's the black box effect,
right.
black
Okay.
box effect I'm referring
Uh,
to, because you're
yep.
given this law
Yep.
and the only thing you're told is, oh no, this is not the right way, and then you ask, what is the
Or do
right
I need
way,
to change? And they
and they say, oh, it's not for us to decide,
go
it's for
away
you
and
to
you do
interpret.
it. Oh,
So
okay. All right.
in that context,
Yeah. Yeah.
Google is saying, okay, if this is non-compliant and we are unable to find a solution, let's see what happens to the industry, to the users, first of all, the European users,
Hmm.
consumers, and second, to the advertisers in the platform, if we shut down or if we go back to 15, 20 years ago and present the results in the old fashioned where it's just blue links not specific for travel,
Okay.
which in my humble opinion is a degradation of the overall experience, first of all for the user,
Yep.
and second, it's preventing or crippling, limiting the ability from hotels and flights and other verticals that are involved with this
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
address demand in the right way.
Hmm.
So it's kind of the worst case scenario because everyone loses.
Yeah.
Everyone loses, the users,
Yeah.
the advertisers, and then the only incumbent that may be getting benefit from this is the OTAs, the online
Yeah.
travel agencies,
Yeah.
who are probably the driving force behind all of this because what they want, in my opinion, what they want to take out is the availability, the pricing, and the dates. Now, how can you book? How can you inform yourself about the travel product without a date and without a price?
Hmm.
It's nonsense. A room night is not a room night. A room night is a space in a hotel directly tied to a check-in date and a checkout date. That's why a
Yep.
room may cost today 50 euros and the other day 1,000 based on demand,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Same thing for flights.
Yep.
So the way I see it is the big OTAs, the big intermediaries, they're trying to end any interaction between supply and demand through Google. And they say no dates, no availability, no refinement chips, just leave that to us because we are the agents and that's what we do. Which
Interesting.
again, I understand their stance, but obviously when you have a law that it's supposed to make things, to level the playing
Yeah.
field, to make
Exactly.
things fairer and open,
Yeah.
giving all of this power to a few private companies, by the way, many of them non-European, I
Hmm.
think it's just not playing on the right direction, or at least not serving the original purpose.
Interesting. And I was reading an article this morning that was talking. I mean, you mentioned their blue links, so
Mhm.
I'm sure others will be familiar. But if you could just kind of clarify
Yeah,
around that, what this
so
actually means around the
yeah,
iterations that
yeah,
we've
yeah.
been seeing.
So the Tumblr links refers to kind of the traditional AdWords canonical structure,
Hmm.
three blue links at the top, three blue links at the bottom, four blue links on the right-hand side,
Yeah.
which means no integration with maps, no real-time pricing, no ability to refine through dates or luxury versus budget or people traveling in the party, holiday rentals versus hotels. So all of that kind of immersive experience that made the vertical search
The
experience
value.
much more enriched and valuable for both
Yeah.
sides of the
Yeah.
equation,
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
supply
As a
and for the
consumer,
demand.
to be able to get that information and go in and see a list of what I was searching for was
Yep,
valuable to me.
correct. Now, Google has chosen three countries, one of them very relevant from an outgoing perspective, which is Germany, Belgium, which is,
Obviously,
Brussels is the capital of Belgium. So I guess
exactly.
there's a reason for that. And
Yeah.
Estonia, there must be a reason as to why they chose it as well. Now, what's going to happen next? We don't know.
Hmm.
According to Google's announcement, this is a 10-day trial or a 10-day test. I'm sure that they will be sharing information on this, or I hope they will. We will be measuring, but again, the way you measure can change the output in many different ways.
Hmm.
Uh, but I'm certain about one thing, that this is negative for the user, first of all, and negative for the advertiser, in this case, the hotels.
Hmm.
So nothing good can come out of this 10-day period. The worst case scenario would be that Google decides to make this permanent and not a test, and actually expand it to other European countries. Um, the way I see things, that could be an option that is being, on the table for Google.
Well, I guess that means Google comply then, don't they? In terms of
Well, of
meeting the
course. I mean,
requirements, but Probably not what the EC originally intended with the DMA, based on what we were talking about in the last video.
It's right. It's like you need
Gone
to come
completely
with
the opposite direction.
with this new regulation about housing efficiency for energy, and say, okay, let me burn down the house. Now there's no house, I'm compliant. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but
There is no house. It's not energy inefficient.
exactly. You say just burn the whole thing. So in a way, this is what could be happening.
Ah, goodness me. Yeah. And as you say, the only winners currently are, and I guess we've got a time lag issue.
We need to see because
Yeah.
we don't know if the gatekeeper status of booking is over, right? So that could further down the road, it could have an impact.
There is still a time issue at the moment, isn't there?
Oh, certainly.
Because whilst Google is having to respond, I mean, you guys have already reiterated this verbally and in writing, the impact that you've seen in terms of the drop of direct booking links for airlines, hotels.
The growth of booking, so the growth of the clicks going to hotel websites in DMA versus non-DMA, there's a 30% delta according to our own data. Now, Google, on their own statement, they mentioned also a 30%. So, and Google is a much bigger entity.
There seems a correlation,
but there is a pattern. There is a pattern somewhere, and this is serious. We're talking about.
So those clicks are going somewhere.
Oh, of course they are.
So the hotel's not getting the direct click and the interaction with the consumer. The consumer's potentially going to get a worse search experience.
No, potentially. They're getting a worse.
Potentially anyway. And whilst all this is going on, those clicks are going somewhere else, which we could assume is likely to be then to the OTAs. And we're not just picking Booking here. It's only because Booking are the only one that are designated the gatekeeper that we're referring to them in the context of the DMA. We're not singling them out for any other reason than they're the only one that apply with that gatekeeper criteria. So it could be going to Expedia and other avenues as well. That's
why we mentioned intermediaries or
exactly
OTAs in general. Now, for those, there's only one OTA that is publicly traded and gatekeeper, which is booking.com. So that's the only comparable, if you will. If you look at the market cap evolution, the market capitalization, the value of the company of booking.com, since the DMA was rolled out until today, there's been an uptick, a growth of 35%, which equates to about 50 billion US dollars of value creation. I'm not saying that this is a direct consequence of the DMA.
No.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that if you observe the timing.
If you were look at the timelines, if you were to map it out and put a line, what did core events happen? There was a uptick.
In that same time period, DMA came into play. I mean, Booking is a fantastic organization, incredible technology, incredible talent, incredible
marketing. They don't get to where they are without having all of that.
Of course, but it's just coincidentally, there has been a massive.
Is it correlation or causation kind of thing? I guess
that I do not know.
No, exactly.
It has happened, so I'm not saying it's a direct consequence. But the facts are there for anyone to check.
Interesting. Okay. Well, look, I'm conscious of your time. That's covered off the 3 key points that we wanted to cover off. This does feel like it's going to run, and so we will revisit and we'll come back to you again in the new year and retouch on. But any kind of final thoughts or comments from your side before we wrap up and let you go?
Yeah, one final thought. First of all, thank you for voicing this. It's a very important and strategic topic that has gone through with very unnoticed, surprisingly.
Yeah.
So for the hotel community that follows, Revenue Hub, I think this is very valuable, and this is thanks to you. And second, we will see how the agenda unfolds in the new year. We are already planning engagements with the European Commission to continue addressing this, but the key next milestone is what happens in 5-6 days from now when Google's test period is over, and what's going to happen after that. Now, it happened also in the very week of Black Friday, which is a key reservation.
Massive.
Let's say that it's hurting the most because it's on a key week in terms of people planning, acquiring, doing reservations for the next year. So those 3 countries are obviously going to be hit. And not only the users in those countries, but the hotels in the destination
Trying to
countries. Think about
draw them.
Spain,
Yeah,
Greece,
yeah, yeah,
Italy,
absolutely.
that
Massive
have
markets.
disappeared from those searches. So this is not only affecting to the Germans or the Estonians or the
Yeah,
Belgians,
yeah,
it's affecting to the other destination countries. And
yeah,
that's very worrying.
yeah.
Travel is a driving force of the economy in the world, but especially in Southern Europe.
Interesting. And I think, as you say, not only the outcome of that experiment, but also the EC's response, compliance or non-compliance to following your meeting when booking was present. So two things to watch out for, and two things for us to revisit and get an update in the new year, I'm sure. But thanks again. Really appreciate you taking the time. Really appreciate you keeping us informed of how things are evolving and breaking it down as well, because you're right. This is really important for the hoteliers, and what we try and do is to kind of make sure we're talking about the topics that are relevant, but let people like you who really know the detail be able to break it down into simple terms that people can really get and understand. So thanks so much for that. It's really appreciated.
Thank you, Trevor. Always a pleasure.
You take care. Well, I hope that conversation was of interest, and thanks again to Javier for joining us. If you have any thoughts or views on this conversation, please do feel free to comment below. It'd be really interesting to hear your views. And if you like the discussion, please don't forget a thumbs up. And if you're interested in more of our videos, here is a link to our Expert Insights playlist, and here is a link to our Coffee Time Chat playlist. And here is the button if you'd like to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. Thanks again for watching.